The first flakes of snow began to fall as Miranda Hayes stepped off the afternoon stage in Bonanza, Colorado, her worn boots sinking into the fresh powder accumulating on the muddy street. And she knew immediately that every eye in town was watching her with the kind of judgment that came from people who thought they knew everything about a stranger just by looking at her threadbare coat and the defiant tilt of her chin. It was December 1883, and the mountain town was already bracing for what the old-timers were calling the worst winter in 20 years. Miranda pulled her thin shawl tighter around her shoulders, feeling the bite of wind cut through the fabric like it was nothing more than gauze. She had traveled 3 days from Denver with barely enough money for the fare, let alone proper winter clothing. Her aunt was supposed to meet her here, supposed to have a warm house and a job waiting at the boarding house she ran. But as Miranda stood on that frozen street with her single battered carpetbag, scanning the faces of curious onlookers, she felt the first tremor of real fear. Her aunt was nowhere to be seen. "Well, would you look at that?" a voice called out from the covered porch of the saloon. "City girl thinks she can just waltz into Bonanza in the middle of winter wearing nothing but that pitiful excuse for a coat." Laughter rippled through the group of men lounging there, their breath forming clouds in the frigid air. Miranda forced herself to stand straighter, to keep her face neutral even as shame and anger warred in her chest. She had learned long ago not to give men the satisfaction of seeing her crumble. "Probably come looking for a husband," another voice chimed in. "Good luck with that, sweetheart. We got standards up here in the mountains." More laughter. Miranda's cheeks burned despite the cold. She turned away from them and started walking down the main street, her feet already going numb in her inadequate boots. The snow was falling harder now, fat flakes that clung to her eyelashes and melted on her lips. She needed to find her aunt's boarding house, needed to get inside before the weather turned truly dangerous. "Miss Hayes." The voice came from behind her, quieter than the jeering men, but somehow cutting through the noise more effectively. Miranda turned to find a tall man approaching, his hat pulled low against the snow. He wore a heavy wool coat that spoke of both practicality and means, and his dark eyes held none of the mockery she had just endured. "Yes," her voice came out steadier than she felt. "I'm Austin Shepard. I work the ranch just north of town." He paused, seeming to measure his words carefully. "Your aunt, Mrs. Patricia Donovan, she asked me to watch for the afternoon stage. She took ill 3 days ago and the doctor won't let her leave her bed." Miranda's heart sank. "Is she going to be all right?" "Doc says it's pneumonia, but she's a strong woman. She's fighting it." Austin gestured toward a sturdy-looking wagon hitched nearby. "She sent word for me to bring you to the boarding house. She's got it all set up for you, and the doc's been checking on her twice daily." Relief flooded through Miranda so powerfully that her knees felt weak. "Thank you. I was beginning to think I had made a terrible mistake coming here." "Those idiots giving you trouble?" Austin glanced back at the saloon porch, where the Cowboys were still watching with interest. His jaw tightened slightly. "Nothing I haven't handled before." Miranda straightened her shoulders again, determined not to appear as desperate as she felt. Austin studied her for a moment, and something shifted in his expression. Respect, maybe, or recognition of a kindred stubbornness. "Well, let's get you out of this weather before it gets worse. Storm's going to be a bad one." He took her carpetbag without asking permission, which would have annoyed her under different circumstances, but the relief of not carrying it another step was too great to protest. He led her to the wagon and helped her up onto the bench seat with a courtesy that felt genuine rather than condescending. Then he climbed up beside her, took the reins, and clicked his tongue to get the horses moving. The snow was already covering the streets in a white blanket, muffling the sounds of the town. Miranda tucked her hands under her arms, trying to preserve what little warmth remained in her fingers. She felt Austin shift beside her, and then he was shrugging out of his heavy coat. "Here," he said, draping it over her shoulders before she could protest. "I've got a wool shirt and vest. You've got nothing but that shawl." "But you'll freeze," Miranda said, even as she pulled the coat closer, feeling the warmth trapped in the fabric seep into her bones. "I'll be fine." Ranch life makes you hardy. He kept his eyes on the road ahead, guiding the horses with practiced ease through the increasing snow. "Besides, wouldn't sit right with me, delivering you to your aunt in worse shape than when I found you." Miranda wanted to argue, wanted to insist she could manage on her own, but the truth was she was already shivering hard enough that her teeth wanted to chatter. Pride was one thing, but freezing to death was another. "Thank you," she said quietly. "That's very kind of you. Your aunt's been good to a lot of folks in this town, including me. When my mother passed 5 years back, Mrs. Donovan made sure there was food on our table for weeks. This is the least I can do to repay that." There was a roughness in his voice when he mentioned his mother, a carefully controlled emotion that suggested the loss still ached. Miranda found herself studying him from the corner of her eye. He was probably in his mid-20s, with strong features weathered by sun and wind. His hands on the reins were calloused and capable, the hands of someone who worked hard for his living. "How long have you lived in Bonanza?" she asked, partly out of genuine curiosity and partly to distract herself from the cold. "All my life. My father came here in '61, right after Colorado became a territory. Started the ranch with nothing but determination and a streak of luck with the cattle. Built it up to something respectable." Austin's voice carried a note of pride mixed with something else, something heavier. "He passed 2 years ago. Heart gave out while he was checking the fence line." "I'm sorry," Miranda said, and meant it. She knew something about loss, about the way it carved out spaces inside you that never quite filled back in. Life's hard out here. You learn to keep moving forward or you don't survive. He glanced at her briefly, his dark eyes assessing. "Your aunt said you lost your parents recently." Miranda nodded, her throat tightening. "Yellow fever. It swept through our neighborhood in St. Louis last summer. They died within 3 days of each other." She swallowed hard against the grief that still felt fresh and raw. "I had nowhere else to go. Aunt Patricia was my mother's only sister. That's rough. I'm sorry for your loss." The simple words, spoken with genuine sympathy, threatened to crack the careful composure Miranda had maintained for months. She blinked rapidly, refusing to let tears fall in front of this stranger, no matter how kind he was being. They rode in silence for a while, the only sounds the creak of the wagon wheels, the steady clip of horse hooves, and the whisper of falling snow. The town fell away behind them, replaced by scattered houses and then open country. The mountains rose dark and massive in the distance, their peaks already white with snow. "The boarding house is just ahead," Austin said finally, pointing to a large 2-story building that looked warm and welcoming despite the weather. Smoke rose from 2 chimneys and lamplight glowed in several windows. "Your aunt keeps 6 regular boarders, all decent men who work either at the mill or the mines. She runs a tight ship, doesn't tolerate any nonsense." "That sounds like Aunt Patricia," Miranda said with a small smile. She remembered her aunt from childhood visits, a brisk woman with kind eyes and no patience for foolishness. Austin pulled the wagon up to the front of the house and set the brake. He jumped down and came around to help Miranda, his hands steady and strong as he lifted her down from the high seat. For just a moment, she was acutely aware of how close they stood, of the warmth radiating from him despite having given her his coat. "Thank you," she said again, suddenly feeling tongue-tied. "Wait here just a moment," Austin said. He retrieved her carpet bag from the wagon bed, then surprised her by scooping her up in his arms before she could protest. "What are you doing?" Miranda gasped, instinctively clutching at his shoulders. "Your boots are already soaked through, and there's 6 inches of snow between here and that front door. No sense in you arriving half frozen." He carried her toward the house as if she weighed nothing, his stride steady and sure. Miranda's heart hammered in her chest, and she told herself it was just the surprise, just the strangeness of being held by a man she had known for all of 20 minutes. But there was something undeniably solid and safe about the way Austin held her, something that made her feel protected for the first time in months. The front door opened before they reached it, revealing a middle-aged woman with a worried face and flour on her apron. "Oh, thank goodness, you found her, Austin. Come in, before you both catch your death." Austin carried Miranda over the threshold into a warm entryway that smelled of baking bread and wood smoke. He set her down gently on a braided rug near the door, making sure she was steady before he released her. "Mrs. Chen, this is Miss Miranda Hayes," Austin said to the woman who had opened the door. "Miranda, this is Mrs. Chen. She helps your aunt run the boarding house." "Welcome, dear Mrs. Chen said, taking both of Miranda's cold hands in her own warm ones. "Your aunt has been so worried about you traveling in this weather. She'll be relieved to know you arrived safely." "How is she?" Miranda asked anxiously, stubborn as always, which the doctor says is a good sign. Mrs. Chen's smile was reassuring. "She's been dosing herself with every remedy known to man and complaining about being confined to bed. I'd say she's on the mend." Relief washed through Miranda again. "Can I see her?" "Of course, dear. But first, let's get you out of those wet things and into something warm. Austin, you'll stay for supper. It's the least we can do after you went out in this storm." Austin hesitated, glancing at Miranda. "I don't want to impose." "Nonsense," Mrs. Chen said firmly. "You brought our girl home safe. Besides, the snow's coming down harder every minute. You'll want a hot meal before heading back to your ranch." "If you're sure," Austin said, and Miranda found herself hoping he would stay, which was ridiculous considering she had just met him. "I'm sure. Now come along, Miranda. Let's get you settled." Mrs. Chen began leading her toward the stairs, then paused to look back at Austin. "Make yourself comfortable in the parlor. I'll bring coffee in just a moment." Miranda followed Mrs. Chen up the narrow staircase, acutely aware of Austin's coat still wrapped around her shoulders. It smelled of leather and pine and something else, something distinctly masculine that made her pulse quicken in a way she didn't quite understand. "Your aunt has been preparing for your arrival for weeks," Mrs. Chen said as they climbed. "She has a room all ready for you, and she's been making plans for how you can help with the boarding house once you've settled in. She's so excited to have family here." Mrs. Chen opened a door at the end of the hallway to reveal a small but charming room with an iron frame bed covered in a colorful quilt, a washstand with a porcelain pitcher and basin, and a window that looked out over the snow-covered landscape. A fire crackled in a small fireplace, filling the room with warmth. "Oh," Miranda breathed, tears pricking her eyes again. After months of uncertainty and fear of not knowing where she would end up or how she would survive, this room felt like a miracle. "It's perfect. Your aunt wanted you to feel welcome." Mrs. Chen moved to a trunk at the foot of the bed and opened it, pulling out a thick woolen dress in a deep blue. "She had the dressmaker make this up for you. It should fit well enough, and it's much warmer than what you're wearing. There are undergarments and stockings in here too, and a proper winter coat." Miranda could barely speak past the lump in her throat. Her aunt, sick with pneumonia, had still taken the time to prepare all this for her. "I don't know what to say." Say you'll get changed and come down for a warm meal, Mrs. Chen said gently, patting her arm. And say you'll return that young man's coat to him. He'll be too polite to ask for it back, even though he needs it. Heat flooded Miranda's cheeks as she realized she was still clutching Austin's coat around her shoulders. Of course. I'll be down shortly. Mrs. Chen left, closing the door softly behind her. Alone for the first time since arriving, Miranda let out a long breath and allowed herself to simply feel the relief of being somewhere safe and warm. She peeled off her damp clothes and dressed in the new things her aunt had provided, marveling at how well they fit and how much warmer the heavier fabric was. She found a brush in the trunk and worked through her dark hair, trying to make herself presentable. When she finally looked in the small mirror hanging above the washstand, she barely recognized herself. The haunted look that had shadowed her eyes for months seemed less pronounced, and there was color in her cheeks again. The blue dress brought out the warm tones in her brown eyes and made her look less like a desperate refugee, and more like a young woman with a future ahead of her. She picked up Austin's coat, folded it carefully over her arm, and made her way back downstairs. Voices drifted from what she assumed was the parlor, and she followed them to find Austin sitting in a comfortable chair near the fireplace, a steaming mug of coffee in his hands. He stood immediately when she entered, his eyes widening slightly as he took in her appearance. "That's a much better fit than what you were wearing," he said, and there was something in his voice that made Miranda's heart skip. "My aunt apparently planned for everything." Miranda held out his coat. "Thank you again for this. You probably saved me from frostbite." Austin took the coat but made no move to put it on. "I'm glad I was there to help. Those men outside the saloon, they should have been ashamed of themselves, mocking you like that." "I'm used to it," Miranda said quietly, sinking into the chair Mrs. Chen gestured toward. "When you're alone and struggling, people seem to think it gives them the right to judge you." "Well, you're not alone anymore," Austin said firmly. "You've got your aunt and this whole house full of people who'll look out for you. And for what it's worth, you've got me too. If anyone gives you trouble in town, you let me know." The fierceness in his voice surprised her, as did the protective instinct it revealed. They barely knew each other, and yet he was already offering to defend her honor. It was both touching and slightly overwhelming. "That's very kind of you," Miranda said carefully, not wanting to presume too much. Mrs. Chen bustled in with a tray of coffee and fresh bread with butter. "Supper will be ready in about an hour. The boarders will be coming in from work soon, and they'll all want to meet you, Miranda." "What should I know about them?" Miranda asked, accepting a cup of coffee gratefully. "Well, there's Mr. Peterson and Mr. Gaines. They work at the lumber mill. Both in their 50s, quiet men who keep to themselves mostly. Then there's young Thomas Wright. He's about 19 and works as a clerk at the general store. The Murphy brothers, Sean and Patrick, they're miners, good-hearted Irish boys who send most of their wages back to their family in Boston. And Mr. Harold Fletcher, he's the schoolteacher, very proper and polite." "Sounds like a full house," Miranda said. "It keeps us busy," Mrs. Chen agreed. "But your aunt loves it. She says after raising 6 children of her own, a quiet house feels too lonely." "6 children?" Miranda asked, surprised. "I knew she had children, but I thought it was only 3. 6, though only 4 survived to adulthood. They're all scattered now, making their own lives. She misses them terribly." Mrs. Chen's expression softened with sympathy. "That's part of why she was so eager for you to come here. Family means everything to Patricia." The conversation continued, easy and comfortable, with Austin occasionally adding details about the town or the surrounding area. Miranda found herself relaxing for the first time in months, feeling the knot of anxiety that had lived in her chest beginning to loosen. The coffee was hot and strong, the bread fresh and delicious, and the warmth of the fire seeped into her bones. When the boarders began arriving, stamping snow off their boots and calling out greetings, Austin rose reluctantly. "I should head back before the storm gets worse." "Be careful out there," Mrs. Chen warned. "It's really coming down now." Miranda walked with Austin to the front door, suddenly not wanting him to leave. "Thank you again for everything. I don't know what I would have done if you hadn't been there." Austin settled his hat on his head and shrugged into his coat. "I'm glad I could help. Your aunt's boarding house is on my route into town, so I pass by here regularly. I'll check in from time to time, make sure you're settling in all right." "I'd like that," Miranda said, and meant it more than was probably wise. Austin looked at her for a long moment, something unreadable in his dark eyes. "Welcome to Bonanza, Miranda Hayes. I have a feeling you're going to fit in just fine here." Then he was gone, disappearing into the swirling snow, and Miranda stood at the door watching until his wagon was out of sight. She pressed her hand against the cold glass of the window beside the door, feeling the contrast between the freezing temperature outside and the warmth at her back. "He's a good man," Mrs. Chen said softly from behind her. "One of the best in this town." Miranda turned to find the older woman watching her with knowing eyes. "I'm sure he is. His father's ranch is one of the most successful in the county, and Austin's worked hard to keep it that way since his father passed. He could have his pick of women in Bonanza, but he's been too busy working to pay much attention to courting." Mrs. Chen smiled. "Though I've never seen him look at anyone the way he was looking at you just now." "We just met," Miranda protested, even as her heart raced at the suggestion. "Sometimes that's all it takes," Mrs. Chen said. "Now come along. Let's introduce you to the boarders and get some food into you. Tomorrow you can see your aunt, once you've had a proper rest." The evening passed in a blur of new faces and names. The boarders were all polite and welcoming, particularly young Thomas Wright, who blushed bright red every time Miranda spoke to him. The Murphy brothers entertained everyone with stories from the mines, and Mr. Fletcher, the schoolteacher, asked Miranda about her education and her interests with genuine curiosity. But through it all, Miranda's thoughts kept drifting back to Austin Shepard, to the way he had stood up for her without being asked, to the gentle strength in his hands as he had carried her through the snow. She told herself not to be foolish, not to read too much into simple kindness, but her heart refused to listen to her head's caution. That night, lying in her warm bed listening to the wind howl outside, Miranda allowed herself to feel something she hadn't felt in a very long time: hope. Maybe, just maybe, she had found more than just refuge in Bonanza. Maybe she had found a place where she could truly belong. The next morning dawned clear and bright, the storm having passed in the night. Miranda woke to sunlight streaming through her window and the smell of coffee and bacon wafting up from the kitchen. She dressed quickly in another of the practical dresses her aunt had provided and made her way downstairs. Mrs. Chen was already in the kitchen, working over a massive cast iron stove. "Good morning, dear. Did you sleep well?" "Better than I have in months," Miranda admitted. "Can I help with breakfast?" "I'd appreciate that. You can start by setting the table in the dining room. Plates are in that cupboard there." Mrs. Chen pointed with a wooden spoon. Miranda fell into the rhythm of helping easily, finding comfort in the familiar domestic tasks. By the time the boarders came down for breakfast, the table was laden with food and the coffee pot was full. The men ate heartily, thanking both Mrs. Chen and Miranda for the meal before heading off to their various jobs. "Your aunt is awake and asking for you," Mrs. Chen said once the kitchen was clean. "Doctor came by first thing this morning and said she's definitely on the mend. But don't tire her out too much." Miranda climbed the stairs to her aunt's room with a mixture of anticipation and nervousness. She hadn't seen Aunt Patricia in nearly 10 years, and she wasn't sure what to expect. She knocked softly on the door. "Come in," a weak but familiar voice called. Miranda opened the door to find her aunt propped up on pillows in a large bed, looking pale but alert. Patricia Donovan had the same dark hair as Miranda's mother, though streaked with gray now, and the same brown eyes that seemed to see everything. "Miranda," Aunt Patricia said, her face breaking into a wide smile. "Oh, let me look at you. You've grown into such a beautiful young woman." Miranda crossed to the bed and took her aunt's outstretched hand, feeling tears spring to her eyes. "Aunt Patricia, thank you so much for taking me in. I don't know what I would have done without you." "Nonsense. Your family and family takes care of each other. I only wish I'd been able to meet you at the stage myself." Patricia squeezed her hand. "But Austin is reliable as they come. He got you here safely, I trust." "He was very kind," Miranda said, feeling her cheeks warm at the memory. Patricia's eyes sharpened with interest. "Was he now? Austin Shepard is one of the finest young men in this county. Smart, hardworking, and decent to his core. His father would be proud of the man he's become." "He mentioned losing both his parents," Miranda said softly. "Tragic, both of them. But Austin didn't let grief destroy him. He took over the ranch and has made it even more successful than his father did. He's got a good head for business and a good heart to go with it." Patricia studied Miranda's face. "Did he make an impression on you?" "I barely know him," Miranda protested, but she could feel her blush deepening. Patricia laughed, a sound that turned into a cough. When she recovered, she said, "Well, you'll have plenty of chances to get to know him better. Austin comes by here regularly, has for years. He checks on me, fixes things that need fixing, brings supplies from town. He's been like a son to me since his mother passed." Miranda felt something twist in her chest at those words. If Austin was like a son to her aunt, what did that make any potential interest between them? But Patricia seemed to read her thoughts. "Don't worry, dear. There's no blood relation and no reason at all you couldn't encourage his attentions if you're so inclined. In fact, I think you two would be very well suited." Patricia's smile was sly. "But I'm getting ahead of myself. You just got here. Take your time settling in, learn the running of the boarding house, and see what develops naturally." They talked for another half hour, with Patricia asking about Miranda's journey and her final months in St. Louis. Miranda found herself pouring out the whole story, the fear and loneliness and desperation that had characterized her life after her parents' deaths. Patricia listened with sympathy and understanding, never once making Miranda feel judged or pitied. "You're safe now," Patricia said firmly when Miranda finished. "This is your home for as long as you want it. And I promise you, life in Bonanza can be good. This is a place where people look out for each other, where hard work is respected, and where a woman can make her own way if she has the courage." "I want to earn my keep," Miranda said. "I want to help with the boarding house, learn everything you can teach me." "We'll start slowly," Patricia promised. "Mrs. Chen can show you the ropes while I recover, but I have no doubt you'll pick it up quickly. Your mother was always the capable one, even when we were girls. I can see that same strength in you." A knock on the door interrupted them. Mrs. Chen poked her head in. "Dr. Morrison is here for his morning visit." "I'll leave you to it," Miranda said, rising from her chair. She kissed her aunt's cheek. "Rest and get well. I want to hear more stories about my mother when she was young." "I have plenty of those," Patricia promised with a smile. Miranda spent the rest of the day learning the routines of the boarding house from Mrs. Chen. There was laundry to be done, rooms to be cleaned, meals to be planned and prepared. It was hard work, but Miranda welcomed it. She had always been industrious, and having tasks to occupy her hands and mind kept her from dwelling too much on her losses. But despite her best efforts to stay focused, her thoughts kept drifting to Austin Shepard. She found herself listening for the sound of wagon wheels, wondering if he would stop by as he had promised. She scolded herself for being foolish, for developing what felt dangerously like a fascination with a man she barely knew. 3 days passed with no sign of Austin. Miranda threw herself into her work, learning the preferences of each boarder, perfecting her bread-making technique under Mrs. Chen's patient instruction, and spending time with her aunt, as Patricia slowly regained her strength. The routine was comforting, and Miranda began to feel like she was truly settling into her new life. On the 4th day, Miranda was out in the yard hanging laundry despite the cold when she heard horses approaching. She turned to see Austin riding up on a handsome bay gelding, leading a second horse behind him. Her heart did that stupid fluttering thing again, and she tried to calm it as she walked to meet him. "Morning," Austin said, touching the brim of his hat. He looked good in the bright winter sunlight, his eyes crinkling at the corners as he smiled at her. "How are you settling in?" "Very well, thank you. Aunt Patricia is getting stronger every day, and I'm learning how to run a boarding house." Miranda wiped her damp hands on her apron, suddenly self-conscious. "How have you been?" "Busy. Had to move the cattle to lower pastures with all this snow, and we've been repairing fence line that got damaged in the storm." He dismounted in one smooth motion. "But I wanted to check on you, make sure those men from the saloon haven't been bothering you." "I haven't been back into town yet," Miranda admitted. "There's been so much to do here." Austin frowned slightly. "You shouldn't let them make you afraid to go where you need to go." "I'm not afraid," Miranda said, though that wasn't entirely true. The memory of their mocking laughter still stung. "I just haven't had a reason to go yet." "Well, maybe I can give you one." Austin gestured to the second horse. "This is Daisy. She's gentle as they come and she needs exercise." "I was thinking you might like to go for a ride, see a bit of the country around here." Miranda's pulse quickened. "I don't know how to ride." "I figured as much, coming from the city, but I can teach you if you're willing to learn." Out here, knowing how to handle a horse is pretty important, especially in winter. Austin's expression was hopeful. "What do you say?" Miranda knew she should be cautious, should think about propriety and the fact that she barely knew this man. But there was something about Austin that made her want to be brave, want to step outside her usual careful boundaries. "All right, let me tell Mrs. Chen where I'm going." She hurried inside, found Mrs. Chen in the kitchen, and explained the situation. Mrs. Chen's face broke into a knowing smile. "You go ahead, dear. I can manage the laundry. Just make sure you're back before it gets dark. It's not proper for a young lady to be out with a gentleman after nightfall, even one as respectable as Austin." Miranda changed into warmer clothes and the heavy coat her aunt had provided, then met Austin back in the yard. He was standing beside Daisy, gently stroking the mare's neck. The horse was a pretty chestnut with a white blaze and kind eyes. "First rule of riding," Austin said as Miranda approached, "is to let the horse get to know you. Hold out your hand, let her smell you." Miranda did as instructed, feeling the soft warmth of Daisy's breath on her palm. The mare nickered softly and Austin smiled. "She likes you, that's a good sign." For the next several minutes, Austin showed Miranda how to approach a horse, how to check the saddle and bridle, and how to mount properly. His instruction was patient and clear, and he kept a steadying hand on her back as she awkwardly swung herself into the saddle for the first time. "How does it feel?" Austin asked, looking up at her. "Hi," Miranda said, gripping the saddle horn perhaps a bit too tightly, "and slightly terrifying." Austin laughed, a warm sound that made something in Miranda's chest feel light. "You'll get used to it. Just remember Daisy can feel your mood." If you're nervous, she'll be nervous. Try to relax and trust her." Easier said than done, but Miranda took a deep breath and forced her shoulders to drop. Austin mounted his own horse with practiced ease, and then they were moving, walking slowly away from the boarding house toward open country. The world looked different from horseback. Miranda could see farther, could feel the rhythm of Daisy's steps beneath her, could sense the power and grace of the animal she rode. Austin kept pace beside her, offering occasional instruction and encouragement. They rode for perhaps half an hour, following a trail that wound through snow-covered meadows and stands of pine trees. The air was cold and clean, scented with pine and snow, and the only sounds were the crunch of hooves and the jingle of harness. It was beautiful in a way that made Miranda's throat tight with emotion. "This is my favorite view," Austin said, pulling his horse to a stop at the top of a small rise. He pointed toward the mountains. "Look there where the peaks catch the light. That's Mount Princeton. And that one's Mount Antero." Miranda followed his gaze, taking in the majestic sweep of mountain ranges that seemed to go on forever. "It's breathtaking. This land gets into your blood if you let it," Austin said softly. "The winters are hard and the work never stops, but there's something about this place that makes it all worthwhile. The freedom, the beauty, the sense that you're part of something bigger than yourself." Miranda looked at him, at the way the sunlight caught in his dark hair, at the quiet contentment on his face. "You really love it here." "I do. Can't imagine living anywhere else." He turned to meet her eyes. "What about you? Think you could come to love it too?" The question felt loaded with meaning beyond just the words. "I think I could," Miranda said honestly. "I already feel more at home here than I did in the city for the past few months." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, just looking at the mountains and breathing the cold air. Then Austin said, "I need to ask you something, and I want you to be honest with me." Miranda tensed slightly. "All right. Those men at the saloon, the ones who mocked you, were you alone because you had no other choice, or was there someone back in St. Louis who let you down?" The question surprised her. "No, there was no one. My parents didn't have many friends, and after they died, I found out pretty quickly that the few people we knew weren't interested in taking in a grown daughter with no means. So there's no man waiting for you somewhere. No sweetheart or intended." Miranda felt heat rise in her cheeks despite the cold. "No, there's no one." Austin nodded, looking satisfied. "Good. I mean, not good that you were alone, but good that there's no complications." He paused, seeming to gather his courage. "Miranda, I know we just met, and I know this probably isn't the right time, but I need you to know that I'm interested in courting you. Properly, with your aunt's permission and everything done right." Miranda's heart hammered so hard she thought Austin might hear it. "We barely know each other." "I know. That's what courting is for, getting to know each other better. But I felt something when I saw you standing in that snow, refusing to let those men break your spirit, and I've felt it even more strongly every time we've talked." Austin's eyes were intense, earnest. "I'm not asking you to make any promises. I'm just asking for the chance to spend time with you, to see if what I'm feeling might grow into something more." Miranda wanted to say yes immediately, wanted to throw caution to the wind and embrace this chance at something good. But years of hardship had taught her to be careful, to think before leaping. "Can I have some time to think about it?" "Of course," Austin said, though she could see disappointment flicker across his face. "Take all the time you need. I'll still be here." They rode back to the boarding house more slowly, the easy conversation from before now tinged with a slight awkwardness. When they arrived, Austin helped Miranda dismount, his hands strong and steady at her waist. "Thank you for the riding lesson," Miranda said. "It was wonderful. We can do it again whenever you like. Whether you decide to accept my courtship or not, I meant what I said about being your friend." Austin tipped his hat. "Take care, Miranda." She watched him ride away, her emotions a tangled mess of hope and fear and longing. She wanted to say yes to Austin's proposal of courtship, wanted it with an intensity that frightened her. But what if she was just being foolish? What if she was mistaking gratitude and relief for something deeper? "You look troubled," Mrs. Chen observed when Miranda came inside. "Austin asked to court me," Miranda blurted out, then immediately felt foolish for sharing something so personal. But Mrs. Chen just smiled warmly. "And you're not sure what to say? I barely know him. It seems too fast, too reckless. Do you like him?" "Yes," Miranda admitted. "Very much." "Does he seem like a good man? A kind man?" "Yes, absolutely." "Then what's the problem?" Mrs. Chen asked gently. "I understand being cautious, especially after everything you've been through. But sometimes, Miranda, the best things in life require a leap of faith. You can't always know how things will turn out before you start." Miranda thought about that for the rest of the day. She thought about it as she helped prepare supper, as she ate with the boarders, as she said goodnight to her aunt. She thought about Austin's steady hands and kind eyes, about the way he had stood up for her without hesitation, about the quiet strength in him that made her feel safe for the first time in so long. That night, before she fell asleep, Miranda made her decision. She would say yes to Austin's courtship. Life was too short and too uncertain to let fear hold her back from something that might be wonderful. The next morning, she told her aunt about Austin's proposal and her decision. Patricia's face lit up with delight. "Oh, I'm so pleased. You two will be good for each other. I can feel it in my bones." "You don't think it's too fast?" Miranda asked. "The heart knows what it wants, dear. And out here in the West, people don't always have the luxury of long, drawn-out courtships. Life is hard, and having a partner makes it easier. If you and Austin feel drawn to each other, why waste time fighting it?" "I suppose that makes sense," Miranda said, though her stomach still fluttered with nerves. "Besides," Patricia added with a mischievous smile, "I'd like to see you settled and happy before I'm too old to enjoy grandnieces and grandnephews." "Aunt Patricia," Miranda exclaimed, blushing furiously. "I'm just saying what everyone's thinking," Patricia said, laughing. "Now, go write that boy a note and let him know your decision. Put him out of his misery." Miranda did just that, composing a simple note that said she would be honored to accept his courtship. She gave it to Thomas Wright, the young clerk, who promised to deliver it to Austin's ranch that afternoon. For the rest of the day, Miranda was a bundle of nervous energy. She cleaned things that didn't need cleaning, reorganized cupboards that were already organized, and generally drove Mrs. Chen to distraction with her restlessness. "Go take a walk," Mrs. Chen finally said, shooing her toward the door. "You're making me anxious just watching you." Miranda bundled up and went outside, breathing in the cold air and trying to calm her racing thoughts. She walked down the lane toward the main road, her boots crunching in the snow. She was so lost in her own head that she didn't hear the approaching wagon until it was quite close. She looked up to find Austin pulling up beside her, his face breaking into a wide smile when he saw her. "I got your note," he said, jumping down from the wagon. "I was coming to see you anyway, but your answer made me drive these horses faster than I probably should have." Miranda found herself smiling back, her nervousness fading in the face of his obvious joy. "I hope I didn't make you wait too long for my answer." "It felt like an eternity," Austin admitted, "but it was worth it." He took a step closer, his expression becoming more serious. "I want to do this right, Miranda. I want to court you properly with respect for you and for your aunt's rules. I'll call on you at appropriate times, we'll spend time together with chaperones when needed, and I won't rush you into anything you're not ready for." "Thank you," Miranda said softly. "I appreciate that." Can I take you for another ride tomorrow if the weather holds? I'd like that very much. They stood there in the snow, smiling at each other like fools until Miranda realized she was getting cold. Austin insisted on walking her back to the house, even though it was barely a few hundred yards. At the door, he took her hand and bowed over it formally. "Until tomorrow, Miss Hayes." "Until tomorrow, Mr. Shepard." Miranda floated through the rest of the day in a daze of happiness. She felt like she was in one of the romance novels she used to read secretly as a girl, the kind where the heroine overcomes hardship and finds true love in the most unexpected place. It seemed too good to be true, and yet here she was, being courted by a wonderful man in the beautiful Colorado mountains. Over the following weeks, Austin became a regular presence in Miranda's life. He came by the boarding house several times a week, always with some excuse. He needed to check on Aunt Patricia, or he had supplies to deliver, or he wanted to fix a loose shutter he had noticed. But everyone knew the real reason was to see Miranda. They went riding when the weather permitted, with Austin teaching Miranda more about handling horses and showing her the beautiful country around Bonanza. They sat in the parlor in the evenings, talking about everything and nothing while Mrs. Chen or one of the boarders served as chaperone. They attended church together on Sundays, with Austin looking handsome in his best suit and Miranda feeling proud to be on his arm. Miranda learned more about Austin with each passing day. She learned that he was 26, just 4 years older than her. She learned that he read poetry in his rare spare moments, which surprised and delighted her. She learned that he had a younger sister who had married a merchant in Denver and whom he missed terribly. She learned that he was kind to his ranch hands, fair but firm, and that they respected him deeply. And Austin learned about Miranda too. He learned about her love of music, though she hadn't touched a piano since her parents died. He learned about her fierce loyalty to those she loved and her stubborn pride that sometimes got her in trouble. He learned about her dreams of one day having a family of her own, a home where children were loved and protected, and never had to feel the kind of fear and uncertainty she had experienced. By the time February arrived, Miranda realized with a sense of wonder that she was falling in love. It wasn't the dramatic, sweeping passion of novels. It was quieter than that, but no less powerful. It was the way her heart lifted when she heard Austin's voice. It was the way she felt safe and cherished when he looked at her. It was the way every shared laugh and every meaningful conversation made her more certain that this man was someone she could build a life with. One snowy Saturday afternoon, Austin invited Miranda to see his ranch. Aunt Patricia, now fully recovered, gave her permission with a knowing smile. "Mrs. Chen will go along as chaperone," she said. "It's important for you to see where and how Austin lives." The ranch was about 5 miles north of the boarding house, nestled in a valley with mountains rising on 3 sides. The main house was a sturdy log structure with a wide porch and stone chimney. There was a large barn, several outbuildings and corrals where cattle moved slowly in the snow. "It's beautiful," Miranda breathed as Austin helped her down from the wagon. "My father built most of it with his own hands," Austin said with obvious pride. The house has 4 bedrooms, a good-sized kitchen, and a parlor with a fireplace big enough to heat the whole place. There's a root cellar out back, a chicken coop, and a smokehouse. He showed them around the property, pointing out improvements he had made and plans he had for expansion. His enthusiasm was contagious, and Miranda found herself imagining what it would be like to live here, to wake up every morning to this view, to work alongside Austin in building a life together. Inside, the house was simply furnished but comfortable. There was a warm feeling to it, despite being a bachelor's home. Austin made coffee and they sat in the parlor, with Mrs. Chen discreetly settling herself with some mending in a corner where she could chaperone without hovering. "I want you to be able to picture yourself here," Austin said quietly, his dark eyes intent on Miranda's face. "I know it's probably too soon to talk about the future, but I can't help thinking about it. Every time I'm here alone, I imagine what it would be like if you were here with me." Miranda's breath caught. "Austin, I'm not proposing," he said quickly. "Not yet. But I wanted you to know where my thoughts are heading. I've never felt about anyone the way I feel about you, Miranda. You've changed everything for me." "You've changed everything for me too," Miranda admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "After my parents died, I thought my life was over in every way that mattered. I thought I'd spend the rest of my days just surviving, never really living. But then I came here and I met you, and suddenly everything feels possible again." Austin reached for her hand, his touch gentle but certain. "It is possible. Whatever future you want, Miranda, I want to help you build it." They sat like that for a long moment, hands clasped, eyes locked, while something deep and profound passed between them. It was a promise without words, a commitment not yet spoken aloud but no less real for its silence. The ride back to the boarding house that evening felt different. There was a sense of inevitability now, a recognition that they were moving toward something permanent and life-changing. Miranda felt a mixture of excitement and terror that kept her awake long into the night. 2 weeks later, on a clear February morning, Austin asked to speak with Aunt Patricia privately. Miranda knew what was coming, and her hands shook as she helped Mrs. Chen prepare lunch. "He's going to ask permission to propose," Mrs. Chen said, watching Miranda with sympathetic eyes. "Are you ready for this?" "I think so," Miranda said, then corrected herself. Yes, I am. I love him, Mrs. Chen, I truly do." "Then everything will work out just fine." When Austin emerged from Patricia's room, he was smiling. He found Miranda in the kitchen and asked if she would take a walk with him. Mrs. Chen nodded her permission, and Miranda grabbed her coat. They walked down the lane in silence, Austin seeming nervous for the first time since Miranda had known him. Finally, when they were out of sight of the house, he stopped and turned to face her. "Your aunt gave me her blessing," he said. "So now I need to ask you directly." He took both her hands in his. "Miranda Hayes, I know we've only known each other for a few months, but I've never been more certain of anything in my life. You're everything I didn't know I was looking for. You're strong and kind and brave, and I want to spend the rest of my life proving myself worthy of you." He dropped to one knee in the snow, pulling a small box from his pocket. "Will you marry me?" Miranda looked down at him, at this good man who had defended her honor, taught her to ride, shared his dreams with her, and shown her that life could be beautiful again. Tears streamed down her face as she nodded. "Yes," she said, her voice breaking with emotion. "Yes, I'll marry you." Austin stood and pulled her into his arms, holding her so tight she could barely breathe. When he finally released her enough to look at her face, he was grinning. "You've just made me the happiest man in Colorado." He opened the box to reveal a delicate gold ring with a small diamond that caught the winter sunlight. "It was my grandmother's," he said as he slipped it onto Miranda's finger. "My father gave it to my mother when they got engaged, and she gave it to me before she died, told me to give it to the woman who captured my heart." "It's perfect," Miranda whispered, staring at the ring through her tears. "Everything is perfect." They walked back to the boarding house hand in hand, their faces glowing with joy. Aunt Patricia took one look at them and burst into happy tears, pulling them both into a fierce hug. Mrs. Chen opened a bottle of wine she'd been saving for a special occasion, and even the boarders were invited to join in a celebratory toast. "When do you want to get married?" Patricia asked once the initial excitement had died down. Miranda and Austin looked at each other. "Soon," Austin said. I don't see any reason to wait, do you? No, Miranda agreed. I don't want a big wedding or a long engagement. I just want to start our life together. Spring, then, Patricia suggested. April, when the weather is better and the wildflowers are blooming. That gives you 2 months to prepare. 2 months sounded both impossibly long and frighteningly short. Miranda threw herself into preparations, working with Aunt Patricia and Mrs. Chen to plan a simple but beautiful wedding. The ceremony would be held at the church in Bonanza, followed by a reception at the boarding house. Miranda wrote to Austin's sister in Denver, introducing herself and inviting her to the wedding. Austin Shepard wrote back with an enthusiastic letter welcoming Miranda to the family and promising to come early to help with preparations. As the weeks passed and spring slowly arrived, melting the snow and bringing the first green shoots to the meadows, Miranda felt her love for Austin deepen and strengthen. They spent as much time together as propriety allowed, making plans for their future and dreaming about the life they would build. They decided Miranda would move to the ranch after the wedding, though she would continue to help her aunt at the boarding house when needed. Austin wanted to expand the cattle operation and maybe add some horses for breeding. Miranda wanted to plant a garden and fill the house with warmth and life. I want children, Austin told her one evening as they sat on the porch of the boarding house, watching the sunset paint the mountains pink and gold. Lots of them, if we're blessed that way. So do I, Miranda said, leaning against his shoulder. I want to give them everything I had before I lost my parents: security, love, a home they can count on. They'll have all that and more, Austin promised. I swear it to you. The weeks flew by in a whirl of activity. Catherine arrived from Denver, a warm and vivacious woman who immediately claimed Miranda as the sister she had always wanted. She helped with dress fittings and flower arrangements and offered advice on everything from household management to marriage with a frankness that both shocked and delighted Miranda. Austin can be stubborn, Catherine warned. He gets an idea in his head and it's hard to shift him. But he's also the most loyal, loving man I know. He'll move heaven and earth for the people he cares about. I've seen that, Miranda said warmly. It's one of the things I love most about him. Finally, on a beautiful April morning with the sky impossibly blue and wildflowers blooming in the meadows, Miranda's wedding day arrived. She dressed in the simple but elegant white gown Aunt Patricia had helped her make, her hair styled by Catherine and adorned with flowers. When she looked at herself in the mirror, she barely recognized the frightened, desperate woman who had arrived in Bonanza just 4 months earlier. You look beautiful, Aunt Patricia said, her eyes shining with tears. Your mother would be so proud. The church was packed with people from the town, all curious to see Austin Shepard marry the mysterious young woman from St. Louis. But Miranda only had eyes for Austin, who stood at the altar looking handsome and slightly nervous in his black suit. The ceremony was brief but heartfelt. When the minister asked Austin if he took Miranda to be his wife, his "I do" rang out clear and strong. And when Miranda spoke her own vows, promising to love and cherish him for the rest of her days, she meant every word with her whole heart. I now pronounce you man and wife, the minister said with a smile. You may kiss your bride. Austin pulled Miranda into his arms and kissed her with a tenderness that made her knees weak. The congregation erupted in applause and cheers, and Miranda found herself laughing through happy tears as she and Austin walked back down the aisle as husband and wife. The reception at the boarding house was a joyful chaos of food and music and congratulations. The Murphy brothers entertained everyone with Irish songs, and even Mr. Fletcher, the schoolteacher, was persuaded to play his fiddle. Austin danced with Miranda until she was breathless and laughing, then danced with his sister and Aunt Patricia and Mrs. Chen, making all the women feel special and appreciated. As the sun began to set, Austin and Miranda slipped away from the party, climbing into the wagon for the ride to the ranch. Everyone came out to see them off, throwing rice and flower petals and shouting good wishes. The ride to the ranch felt surreal, the two of them alone together for the first time as husband and wife. Austin kept stealing glances at Miranda, as if he couldn't quite believe she was really his. Miranda felt the same sense of wonder, mixed with nervousness about the wedding night ahead. But when they arrived at the ranch and Austin carried her over the threshold, his touch was gentle and patient. He had prepared the house beautifully, with fires burning in the fireplaces and candles lit throughout. In the bedroom, he helped her out of her wedding dress with reverent care, his eyes full of love and desire but also respect for her innocence. "We'll take this at your pace," he murmured against her hair. "I love you, Miranda. I'll never do anything to hurt you or make you afraid." And he kept that promise, showing her with infinite patience and tenderness what it meant to be loved by a good man. By the time dawn light crept through the bedroom window, Miranda lay in Austin's arms feeling cherished and safe, and more completely happy than she had ever imagined possible. The next months unfolded like a beautiful dream. Miranda threw herself into making the ranch house a true home, planting her garden, learning to preserve food for the winter, and caring for the chickens that provided eggs. Austin worked hard alongside his ranch hands, but he always made time for Miranda, always made sure she knew she was his priority. They established routines and rhythms, learning each other's habits and preferences. Austin discovered that Miranda sang while she cooked, her voice sweet and clear. Miranda learned that Austin liked to read poetry aloud to her in the evenings, his deep voice making even familiar verses sound new and meaningful. They had their first argument in June, over something silly that Miranda couldn't even remember later. But Austin had been right when he said he could be stubborn, and Miranda was equally determined not to back down. They spent a miserable afternoon avoiding each other before Austin finally cornered her in the garden and pulled her into his arms. "I'm sorry," he said gruffly. "I was being pig-headed." "You were right." "I'm sorry too," Miranda admitted. "I should have listened better instead of getting defensive." They kissed and made up, and the lesson they both learned was that honesty and communication would serve them better than pride or stubbornness. In July, Miranda's monthly cycle failed to arrive. She waited another week before allowing herself to hope, then another week before telling Austin. When she finally worked up the courage to share her suspicion, his face went through a series of expressions: shock, joy, fear, and then joy again. "A baby," he said, his voice cracking slightly. "We're going to have a baby, I think so. It's still early, but all the signs are there." Austin swept her up in his arms and spun her around, whooping with delight. "We're going to have a baby." The pregnancy progressed smoothly through summer and into fall. Miranda experienced some morning sickness, but nothing too severe, and she thrived in the mountain air. Austin became almost comically protective, trying to prevent her from doing any heavy work and treating her like she was made of glass. "I'm pregnant, not dying," Miranda finally said with exasperation when he tried to stop her from gathering eggs. "Women have been doing this for thousands of years." "I'm perfectly capable of handling regular chores." "I just want to take care of you," Austin protested. "You do take care of me every single day, but you need to let me take care of our home too. It makes me feel useful and needed." They worked out a compromise, with Austin helping with the heavier tasks, while Miranda continued with the daily household work she enjoyed. Catherine visited in September, bringing baby clothes she had sewn and more practical advice, that made Miranda grateful for the sister-in-law she had gained. Aunt Patricia came to the ranch regularly, keeping a watchful eye on Miranda's health and making sure she was eating properly and resting enough. "You're doing wonderfully," she assured Miranda. "You've got color in your cheeks and strength in your step. This baby is going to be healthy and strong, just like you." In December, as snow began falling again and Miranda grew large and uncomfortable, she sometimes thought back to that day almost exactly a year earlier, when she had stepped off the stage into the snow and heard the Cowboys mocking her. How terrified she had been, how uncertain of her future, and how everything had changed the moment Austin Shepard had stepped forward to claim her as someone worthy of protection and respect. "What are you thinking about?" Austin asked one evening as they sat by the fire, his hand resting on her swollen belly. "About how far we've come," Miranda said softly. "A year ago I had nothing and no one. Now I have you and this baby and a home I love. Sometimes it feels too good to be true." "It's not too good," Austin said firmly, pulling her closer. "You deserve every bit of happiness, Miranda. You're the strongest, bravest woman I know. You took a terrible situation and turned it into something beautiful. That's all you, not luck or chance." "You helped," Miranda said. "You saw me when I needed to be seen. You stood up for me when no one else would." "And I'd do it again 1,000 times over," Austin said, kissing her forehead. "You and this baby are my whole world now." The baby came in late February, during another snowstorm that seemed determined to rival the one from the previous year. The doctor barely made it to the ranch in time, and Aunt Patricia and Mrs. Chen were both there to help. Austin paced the hallway outside the bedroom, his face pale with worry every time Miranda cried out. But when he finally heard the wail of a newborn baby, followed by the doctor calling him inside, his fear transformed into overwhelming joy. He entered the bedroom to find Miranda exhausted but smiling, cradling a tiny bundle in her arms. "It's a boy," she said, her voice hoarse but filled with wonder. "Austin, we have a son." Austin crossed to the bed and looked down at his son for the first time. The baby had a shock of dark hair and was screaming lustily, his tiny fists waving in indignation at being thrust into the cold world. "He's perfect," Austin breathed. "Miranda, he's absolutely perfect. You want to hold him." Austin took the baby with trembling hands, cradling him against his chest with a gentleness that made Miranda's heart overflow with love. "Hello, little one," Austin murmured. "Welcome to the world. We've been waiting for you." They named him James after Austin's father and called him Jamie for short. He was a good baby, strong and healthy, and he quickly became the center of their world. Austin proved to be a devoted father, getting up for night feedings without complaint and spending hours just watching his son sleep with an expression of awed wonder on his face. "I never knew I could love someone this much," Austin admitted one night as he rocked Jamie in his arms. "I thought what I felt for you was the deepest love possible, but this is something different. It's like my heart expanded to make room for him." "I know exactly what you mean," Miranda said, watching her husband and son with tears in her eyes. The years that followed were filled with the joys and challenges of building a life together. Jamie grew into an energetic toddler who loved following his father around the ranch. The cattle operation expanded successfully, making the Shepard Ranch one of the most prosperous in the county. Miranda's garden flourished, and she became known for her preserves and baked goods, which she sometimes sold in town. In the spring of 1886, Miranda gave birth to twin girls, Emma and Lily, who had their father's dark eyes and their mother's stubborn chin. Austin was utterly besotted with his daughters, and Miranda often found him sneaking into the nursery just to watch them sleep. "I'm going to have to beat the boys away with a stick when they get older," Austin grumbled, which made Miranda laugh. That's years away yet. For now, let's just enjoy them being little. Life wasn't always easy. There were hard winters and dry summers, cattle that got sick, and the constant financial pressures of running a ranch. But through it all, Miranda and Austin faced every challenge together, their love growing stronger with each passing year. Aunt Patricia remained a constant presence in their lives, spending time at the ranch and spoiling her great nieces and nephews shamelessly. Mrs. Chen eventually retired from the boarding house and moved into a small cottage on the Shepard property, where she helped care for the children and taught them all to cook. When Jamie was 7 and the twins were 4, Miranda discovered she was pregnant again. This time, the pregnancy was harder, and she was confined to bed for the last 2 months. But in November 1889, she delivered a healthy baby girl they named Anna Patricia, after both grandmothers. 4 children, Austin said, holding his newest daughter with the same wonder he had shown with Jamie. We've been truly blessed. We have, Miranda agreed, looking around at her family, more blessed than I ever dreamed possible. On a snowy evening in December 1890, 7 years after that fateful day when she had arrived in Bonanza, Miranda stood on the porch of the ranch house watching the snow fall. Austin came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist and resting his chin on her shoulder. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, a question that had become familiar over their years together. "About how that cowboy stepped forward and changed my life," Miranda said, leaning back against him. "About how one moment of kindness can alter everything." "It wasn't just kindness," Austin said softly. "I took one look at you and knew. I knew you were going to be important to me, that our lives were meant to be intertwined. It was the easiest decision I ever made, claiming you as mine." "Best decision you ever made, you mean," Miranda corrected with a smile. "That too." They stood there together in the cold, watching the snow cover the world in white, listening to the sounds of their children playing inside the warm house. The ranch stretched out around them, solid and prosperous, a testament to years of hard work and dedication. The mountains rose in the distance, eternal and beautiful, the same mountains that had witnessed their first meeting and their wedding and every joy and sorrow since. "You ever miss St. Louis?" Austin asked. Miranda considered the question, then shook her head. "No, this is my home now, you're my home. I wouldn't trade this life for anything in the world. Not even on days when the kids are driving you crazy and the chickens escape and the stove acts up," Miranda laughed. "Not even then. Those are the moments that make up a real life, a full life. They're perfect in their own imperfect way." Austin turned her in his arms and kissed her, a slow, sweet kiss that still made her heart race after 7 years of marriage. "I love you, Miranda Shepard." "Thank you for saying yes to that nervous cowboy in the snow." "I love you too," Miranda said. "Thank you for seeing me when I needed to be seen, for standing up for me when no one else would, for building this beautiful life with me." As the years continued to pass, the Shepard family became a cornerstone of the Bonanza community. Jamie grew into a young man who shared his father's love of ranching and his mother's quick mind. The twins were inseparable, 2 halves of a whole, and little Anna was the baby everyone doted on. Miranda never forgot those dark months after her parents died, when she had felt so alone and hopeless. She made it her mission to help others who found themselves in difficult circumstances, offering work to those who needed it and opening her home to anyone who needed refuge. Austin supported her completely, proud of the generous, compassionate woman he had married. On their 10th anniversary, Austin took Miranda back to the spot where they had first ridden together, where he had shown her the mountains and told her about falling in love with the land. They left the children with Aunt Patricia and Mrs. Chen for the day, a rare moment alone together. "You remember this place?" Austin asked as they dismounted. "Of course I do. This is where I started to fall in love with you, though I didn't want to admit it yet." "Really?" "I thought it was when I carried you through the snow," Miranda laughed. "That was the beginning of my interest, but this was when I really started falling. You looked so content, so at peace, and I wanted to be part of that peace." "You are part of it," Austin said, pulling her close. "You're the center of it. Everything good in my life flows from you." They renewed their vows right there on the hillside, with only the mountains as witnesses, promising each other another lifetime of love and partnership. Then they returned home to their children and the life they had built together, grateful for every moment and every blessing. Years later, when Miranda was an old woman with grandchildren playing at her feet, she would tell them the story of how she came to Bonanza in the snow, how the Cowboys mocked her, and how one brave, kind man stepped forward to claim her. She would tell them about the power of love to transform lives, about the importance of seeing people's worth even when others couldn't, about building something beautiful out of hardship and fear. And she would always end the story the same way. Sometimes, the worst moments of your life are actually the beginning of the best things that will ever happen to you. You just have to be brave enough to keep going, to accept the help that's offered, and to believe that better days are coming. Because they are. They always are. But in this moment, as Miranda stood on that hillside with Austin on their 10th anniversary, she wasn't thinking about the future or the past. She was simply present in the moment, feeling the Colorado sun on her face and her husband's arms around her, knowing that she was exactly where she was meant to be. The ranch continued to thrive, growing larger and more successful with each passing year. Jamie eventually married a nice girl from Denver and brought her to the ranch to help run the operation. The twins married local boys, both good men who treated them well, and built homes on adjacent properties so the families could stay close. Little Anna, who turned out to be the most adventurous of all the children, went to college in Denver and became a teacher, though she always returned to the ranch for holidays and summers. Austin and Miranda grew old together, their hair turning gray and their faces weathering with time, but their love never diminishing. They took evening walks together until Austin's legs grew too weak, and then Miranda would sit with him on the porch, holding his hand and watching the sun set over the mountains they both loved so much. When Austin finally passed at the age of 78, with Miranda at his side and their children and grandchildren filling the house, his last words were, "Thank you for being mine." Miranda held his hand and whispered back, "Thank you for claiming me." She lived another 5 years after Austin's death, remaining sharp and engaged until the very end. She spent her time helping with the ranch, playing with her great-grandchildren, and writing down the stories of her life so that future generations would know where they came from and what sacrifices had been made to build the family they were part of. On a snowy December morning, exactly 60 years after the day she had first arrived in Bonanza, Miranda passed away peacefully in her sleep. Her family gathered for the funeral, celebrating a life well lived and a love story for the ages. They buried her next to Austin on the hillside where they had renewed their vows, where the mountains stood eternal witness to their love. And if you visit that spot today, you can still see the two headstones side by side, weathered by time but still standing strong. The inscription on Miranda's stone reads simply, "She was brave enough to step into the snow and love enough to stay." On Austin's stone, he stepped forward and found his forever. The ranch still operates, run now by the 5th generation of Shepards, And the story of Austin and Miranda is still told to every new child born into the family. It's a reminder that sometimes the best things in life come from the hardest moments, that love can bloom even in the coldest winters, and that one moment of courage and kindness can change not just one life, but generations to come. The town of Bonanza grew and changed over the decades, but it never forgot the couple who had helped shape its character. The boarding house that Patricia Donovan ran became a historical landmark, and tourists still visit to hear the story of the young woman who arrived in the snow with nothing but hope and courage, and the cowboy who saw her worth when others saw only an object of mockery. In the end, it wasn't just a love story. It was a testament to the power of human decency, to the importance of standing up for those who need defending, and to the beautiful truth that sometimes the right person comes along at exactly the right moment to change everything. Austin and Miranda's love story became legend, passed down through generations not just in their own family but throughout the entire community. A reminder that true love, built on respect and kindness and shared dreams, can weather any storm and last for all time. Their great-great-grandchildren still ride the same trails Austin first showed Miranda, still watch the sunset paint the mountains in shades of pink and gold, still feel the magic of the Colorado wilderness that brought two souls together on a snowy day in 1883. And they carry forward the legacy of courage, compassion, and enduring love that Austin and Miranda built together, one day at a time, one challenge at a time, one moment of tenderness at a time. The story of the cowboy who stepped forward and the woman he claimed lives on, a beacon of hope for anyone who has ever felt lost or alone or mocked by the world. It reminds us all that better days are always possible, that love can find us in the most unexpected places, and that sometimes all it takes is one person brave enough to step forward and say, "You're worth protecting, you're worth defending, you're worth loving." And in a world that can often be cold and harsh, that message of hope and redemption continues to warm hearts, just as it warmed Miranda's on that long-ago December day when she stepped into the snow and found her forever.